لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا اللهم انفعنا بالقرآن العظيم واجعله لنا إماما ونورا وهدى ورحمة يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. So we begin, as we mentioned yesterday in the introductory class, we're going to begin each of these sessions with one of the points of advice that Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah he gives about what he terms أعمال الباطن في تلاوة القرآن, the inner etiquettes that a person should have when reciting the Quran. And what we discussed yesterday, he mentions there's 10 etiquettes, and each day we'll take one of these etiquettes. What we mentioned yesterday is the outer etiquettes are known in terms of being in a state of wudu and in terms of sitting, how to sit when reading the Quran and how to handle the Quran and so on. But أعمال الباطن, inner etiquettes, the first what we looked at yesterday, فهم عظمة الكلام, to understand the greatness of the words themselves that you're reading. We discussed that yesterday. The second etiquette, inner etiquette of the Quran, التعظيم للمتكلم, is to venerate and honor the one that's speaking. To venerate the one that's speaking, which is slightly different to the previous point. The previous point was about understanding the weight of the words of the Quran. This is about honoring the mutakallim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's about honoring and recognizing the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who speaks to you through these words. So Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah suggests, he advises that when a person is about to sit down and read Quran, he should bring into his heart a feeling of the greatness, عظمة المتكلم, the greatness of the one that's speaking to him. And he should understand that the words that he's reading, ليس من كلام البشر, these are not human words, these are not coming from a human being. And he should understand that what he's reciting is kalamullah ta'ala, is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which places him in a degree of danger. There's a danger that comes with reading kalamullah ta'ala, because kalamullah ta'ala, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hisnun mamnu'. There's a thought of prevention around the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that kalamullah ta'ala, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, cannot be touched if a person is not in wudu, cannot be recited if a person has not had ghusl. So there's a degree of protection that centers the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based upon the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, and none can touch it except for those who are purified. None can touch the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except for those who are purified. And purity here is inner and outer. Nobody can come to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless they're physically purified. Nobody with their heart can have a connection to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless their hearts are purified. And when somebody finds that they have difficulty reading the Quran, that they have some type in terms of maintaining a connection to the Quran, they find some problem, they're not consistent with reading it, they don't find enjoyment in reading it, they don't have any ladha with the Quran, there's no pleasure with reading the Quran. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only allows those who are purified to come to the Quran. So there should be a concern not just about outward purity. When we do wudu, when we do ghusl, Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwab wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. Al-mutatahhirin, those are completely purified. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. Only those who are completely purified can come to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when coming to the Quran, a person must cleanse his heart of any type of filth, and he must illuminate his heart by having a sense of at-ta'zim wa tawqir, of the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find this as a practice of Salaf al-Salih, the righteous early believers. The great companion Sayyidina Ikramah, the son of Al-La'in, Abu Jahl, when he would have the Mus'haf in front of him, sometimes he would faint just because the Mus'haf was in front of him. Just because the Quran was in front of him, he would faint. And he would say, Huwa kalamu Rabbi, Huwa kalamu Rabbi. And this is the words of my Lord, this is the words of my Lord. So he had ta'zim. He had ta'zim. He understood the greatness of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. how do you get that sense of greatness? How do you put that ta'zeem of the mutakallim within your heart, of the one who's speaking? Imam Al-Ghazali says the only way you do that, يتفكر في صفاته وجلاله وأفعاله, reflect over the attributes of God and the majesty of God Almighty and the acts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as you're sitting down to read the Quran, فإذا حضر بباله العرش والكرسي والسماوات, and reflect over the arsh, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is where this book came from. Reflect over the kursi, the chair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reflect over the heavens and the earth, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And reflect over the fact that everything in existence is part of the creation of God Almighty. It's all af'alillahi ta'ala. It's all part of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that everything in existence is within the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's within the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything in existence, the raziq is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who provides for it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything in existence, mutaraddid fi qabdati qudratihi subhanahu wa ta'ala, is within the grasp of the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At any moment, He can show it fadl, graciousness. He can display mercy towards it. Any moment, He can punish that person. And He can unleash His revenge against that person. Every single moment, we are within the qabda of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are within the grasp of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It may be qabda rahmah. It may be qabda niqmah. It may be that He deals with us through mercy. It may be that He deals with us through His anger. And in an'ama fa bifadlihi wa in aqaba fa bi'adlihi. And we should always remember, this is all about azamat al-mutakallim, understanding who it is that's speaking to us. That if He wants to show favors to us, if He wants to send down any blessings upon us, then it's just because He's al-mutafaddil, that it's His grace towards us. I.e., it's nothing that we've deserved. All of the ni'am that we taste from, in an'ama fa bifadlihi, then it's from His fadl, it's from His grace. We don't deserve anything of what we receive, but He gives it despite us. Wa in aqaba fa bi'adlihi. But if He punishes us, then we do deserve that. Because of how we are towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we do deserve to be punished. It's His justice that dictates that. So understand, that's the mutakallim. When you read in Quran, that's the one whose words you're reading. The one who, when He gives you something, you don't deserve it, but He gives it to you. And the one, if He's going to punish you, you deserve that. It's bi'adli, it's through His justice that He punishes. وَأَنَّهُ الَّذِي يَقُولُ هَؤُلَاءِ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ وَلَا أُبَالِي وَهَؤُلَاءِ إِلَى النَّارِ وَلَا أُبَالِي. And He's the one that's speaking to you. As this is warid fil hadith. This comes from the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the one who will say in Yawm al-Qiyamah, those people to paradise and I don't care. Those people to hellfire and I don't care. That's the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot dictate who goes into paradise. You cannot dictate who goes into hellfire. It's all Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you understand that's the mutakallim, when you understand that's the one who's speaking to you, when you read Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, when you read Ya ayyuhan nasu attaqu rabbakum, anything in the Quran you read, that's the mutakallim that you're dealing with. That's the words, or that's the speaker who's speaking to you. Then it gives you a greater sense of awe as you come to the Quran. And perhaps one day we'll be like Ikrimah and we'll faint when we come to the Quran. And that's a truly blessed state to be in. Imam An-Nawawi, for example, rahimahullah, and this is part of ta'zeem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever honors the symbols of God, that's from piety in the heart. Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, he says that it's a recommended practice that if somebody happens to be walking with the Quran, that you stand. Anybody has a Quran, a mushaf, you stand. It's an adab with people of honor, like your parents, like people of knowledge, that you stand, ta'zeeman lahum, to honor them. The Quran is greater than any human being. The Quran is greater than any human being. So Imam An-Nawawi says part of ta'zeem, of kalamillahi ta'ala, of honoring the word of God Almighty, is that you stand for it. So before fainting, maybe standing. And then eventually fainting will come when we truly understand the gravity. But if we don't even stand for the Quran, then there's not a chance that we'll faint for the Quran. If we don't feel anything when the book of God walks in front of us, we won't feel anything towards it, then then the experiences of those companions will never have. So that's the second etiquette, internal etiquette with the Quran, at-ta'zeem lil-mutakallim, to honor the one that speaks through the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, we move on now to Sahih Al-Bukhari, Kitab al-Tafsir. That's what we're studying. We did an introduction of Surah An-Nisa. For those who've come new, over the last couple of years, we've been going through, in Ramadan, we have a series of classes where we go through Kitab al-Tafsir from Sahih Al-Bukhari. And by that, maintain connection to Kalamullah, Kalam al-Rasul, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the words of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Remembering the great words of Imam al-Shafi'i. Great words of Imam al-Shafi'i says, Jami'u kalam al-a'imma sharhun lis-sunnah. So that every word that any of the Imams have ever said is an explanation of the Sunnah. Wa jami'u sunnah sharhu kalam Allah. And everything that's in the Sunnah is an explanation of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa jami'u kalam Allah ta'ala, or jami'u al-Qur'an sharhun li asma'illahi ta'ala. And all of the Quran is an explanation of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of the Quran is just to understand the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the Salihin, one of the ulama who came afterwards, and he said, وَجَمِيعُ أَسْمَاءِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى شَرْحًا لِاسْمِ اللَّهِ الْأَعْظَمِ. Said all of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are an explanation of the supreme name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have layers. The Quran is the citadel, it's the peak, but you have layers that connect to it before. So as we study the Quran, the first place we go to is the Quran, then the Sunnah, then Kalam al-Ilm. The first place we go to understand the Quran is the Quran. Then we go to the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so by studying Sahih Al-Bukhari, Kitab al-Tafsir, we bring the two together. We bring the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to understand the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We introduced Surah An-Nisa. We did an overview of Surah An-Nisa. And just to put a context to Surah An-Nisa. Surah An-Nisa is part of the 7 long surahs. The Prophet ﷺ, he termed the first 7 surahs in the Quran as the Sab' al-Tiwal, the 7 long surahs, which begins with Surah Al-Baqarah and goes through Surah At-Tawbah. 7 long surahs that begin the Quran. Out of those 7 long surahs, all with the exception of 2 of them, 5 out of the 7 were revealed in Medina. 2 of them were revealed in Mecca. The 2 that were revealed in Mecca is Surah Al-An'am and Surah Al-A'raf. Surah Al-An'am is Surah number, 6. Surah number 6, Surah Al-An'am and Surah Al-A'raf were revealed in Mecca. The remaining 5, Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, An-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah, that's Al-Ma'idah, Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, An-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah, Al-Anfal, Al-Tawbah. No, Al-Anfal, Al-Tawbah. Although that actually comes to 8. I mean, just a side point here, because I just realised the point here. When the Prophet termed the 7 long surahs, and the ulama said it's up to Tawbah, they did it on the basis that Surah Al-Anfal and Tawbah are treated like one surah. So when you actually count Baqarah to Tawbah, it's actually 8 surahs. But Surah Al-Anfal and Surah Tawbah are treated like one surah, which is one of the reasons you don't have a Bismillah to separate between them. When you look at Mawdu' al-Suratayn, when you look at the subject matter of these 2 surahs, they are as one surah. They are treated like one surah. Even though when you look at the actual subject within, they're very different. Surah Al-Anfal is revealed at the time of Badr, at the very beginning, 2nd year after Hijrah. Surah At-Tawbah is revealed at the time of Hunayn, time of Tabuk, it's at the very end, revealed in the 10th year after Hijrah. But the subject matters are interlinked, so they're treated like one surah. Hence there's no Bismillah between them. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu ardah, when he was asked by Abdullah ibn Abbas, why is there no Bismillah with Surah At-Tawbah? He said, لأنها نزلت بالرحمة وهي نزلت بالسيف. He said, because Bismillah comes with mercy, but that surah comes with the sword. It's about war. So indicate it's not appropriate, it's not befitting that it begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So when you look at Sab' al-Tiwal, all of them, the 7 long surahs, all of them except for Al-An'am, Surah 6, and Al-A'raf, Surah 7, All of them were revealed in Medina, including Surah An-Nisa. And when you study Ilm al-Quran, there's a clear distinction between a Surah al-Makkiyah or a Surah al-Madaniyah. The surahs revealed in Mecca, they're about da'wah, they're about calling people to faith. You can summarize all of the surahs that were revealed in Mecca, over 80 surahs that were revealed in Mecca, at Tawheed. It's about faith. It's about faith. All the remaining surahs that were revealed in Medina, it's around 20, or it's around 20, there's an ikhtilaf about 20 of them. All of those surahs revealed in Medina, at Tashri', in one word, it said it's about law, it's about establishing a legal system for believers to live by. Surah An-Nisa is Madani. Surah An-Nisa was revealed in Medina, and we can put it in a more particular context. Surah Al-Baqarah, you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, the first revelation in Medina is Surah Al-Baqarah. So the early years of Medina is Surah Al-Baqarah. Although Surah Al-Baqarah spanned the whole of Medina, because the last verse that was revealed to the Prophet is in Baqarah. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Surah Al-Imran comes after. That's around the time of Uhud, because Surah Al-Imran speaks a lot about Uhud. So that's around the 3rd year after Hijrah. You have Al-Imran. After that, around the 4th and 5th year, that's Surah An-Nisa. For around the 4th and 5th year of Hijrah, Surah An-Nisa. So it's being revealed around the middle of the Madani period, which is the point where the society of Medina is being established. And that's why when we discussed this before, yesterday, so that's the key point of Surah An-Nisa. It's building up ijtima', it's building up a mujtama' Muslim, it's building up a Muslim community, a Muslim society. So it was revealed around the year 4 and 5 after Hijrah. One point of note, there is one ayah in Surah An-Nisa. I think it's ayah number 57 or 58. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. Although the whole of Surah An-Nisa is revealed in Medina, there's one verse that was revealed in Mecca, but it's actually counted as being in Medina. Just to find the verse number for those who are interested in it. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. So it's ayah 58 in Surah An-Nisa, which was revealed in Fath Mecca, the conquest of Mecca, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet, Sayyidina Ali, Uthman ibn Talha, who was the holder of the keys of the Kaaba, he wouldn't give over the keys, so the Prophet couldn't get into the Kaaba. So Sayyidina Ali forcibly took it off him. And he opens the door for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As the Prophet comes out, he prays raka'at inside the Kaaba. This is on the morning of the conquest of Mecca, 8 years after Hijrah. When he comes out, he tells Sayyidina Ali to return it back, to return the keys back. And Uthman ibn Talha, he asked why. He said, you've taken it, you've conquered. Why? He said, because Allah just revealed to me the ayah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. Allah ordered you to return back trust to their people. So there's this discussion around that verse, and there's a real lesson about that verse. But here the point being, even though that verse was revealed in Mecca, and it's the only ayah in the Quran, نَزَلَتْ فِي جَوْفِ الْكَعْبَةِ. It's the only ayah that was revealed inside the Kaaba to the Prophet. Only one ayah in the Quran. Surah An-Nisa, verse 58, is the only ayah in the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet فِي جَوْفِ الْكَعْبَةِ, inside of the Kaaba. But it's still considered to be Madani, not Makki. Because في علم القرآن, in the science of Quran, the definition of Makki and Madani is not based on location. It's based on time period. Madani is any surah Madani or ayah Madaniya is anything that was revealed to the Prophet after he migrated to Medina, wherever he was. So the verse that was revealed, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, today I've completed your religion, it was revealed at Arafah to the Prophet, the final year. It's Madani, it's not Makki. It's Madani because it was revealed to the Prophet after the Hijrah, after the Hijrah to Medina. So that ayah, verse 58, is a point and note because it's the only ayah that was revealed inside the Kaaba, and it was the only, and even though it's in the Kaaba, it's still considered Madani. So the whole of Surah An-Nisa is considered to be a Madani surah. Before beginning to look at the book of Exegesis, the hadith in there, we just want to open by looking at the first verse in Surah An-Nisa. Fawatih as-Surah. In the books of the science of the Quran, Ilm al-Quran, you have a study around the openings of surahs and how Allah begins surahs. And although that's more particularly a discussion around the opening words of surahs, like the first words that come in surahs, are of significance when studying a surah. But the first ayah and the last ayah is always something to look at when studying a surah. So Surah An-Nisa, which comes straight after Ali Imran. Ali Imran ends with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha wasbiru wasabiru warabitu. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu usbiru wasabiru warabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. O believers, be patient and remain steadfast and have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that you're successful. Surah Ali Imran ends with an order, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Surah An-Nisa begins, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ. That's the immediate link. You see connections between surahs. The connection between Ali Imran and An-Nisa. Ali Imran ends with an order, اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Surah An-Nisa begins, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ. The same instruction. Ali Imran ends, have taqwa of Allah so you're successful. Surah An-Nisa begins, O humanity, have taqwa of your Lord. Be conscious and be aware of your Lord. Looking at Surah An-Nisa in particular, there are only two surahs in the Quran that begin with Ya Ayyuhan Nas. There are only two surahs in the Quran that begin with Ya Ayyuhan Nas. Surah An-Nisa and Surah Al-Hajj. Surah An-Nisa and Surah Al-Hajj. Both of them begin with Ya Ayyuhan Nas, and both of them begin with the exact same beginning. Ya Ayyuhan Nas ittaqu rabbakum. Surah Al-Hajj, Ya Ayyuhan Nas ittaqu rabbakum. Surah An-Nisa and Surah Al-Hajj start in the exact same manner. And nothing is accidental in the Quran. لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه. Nothing is accidental in the Quran. If you split the Quran up into two halves, Surah number 4 from the beginning. Surah number 4 from the beginning begins with Ya Ayyuhan Nas ittaqu rabbakum. Surah number 4 from the center begins with Ya Ayyuhan Nas ittaqu rabbakum. When you look, there's an exact symmetry in the Quran in terms of the beginning with Ya Ayyuhan Nas. Surah An-Nisa is the fourth surah from the beginning of the Quran. Surah Al-Hajj is fourth surah from the middle of the Quran. The fourth surah, both of them begin Ya ayyuhan nasu ittaqu rabbakum. But then you have a slight difference, because Surah Al-Hajj is generally, although it's in ikhtilaf, it's generally considered to be Surah Makkiyah. Generally, Surah Al-Hajj is considered to be a surah that was revealed in Mecca, because a lot of the themes in Surah Al-Hajj relate to Mecca. But there is some discussion about that. Whereas Surah An-Nisa is Surah Madaniyyah, it's Surah revealed in Medina. One of the key ways you can recognize a surah that was revealed in Mecca is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses by saying Ya Ayyuhan Nas. One of the key ways you can recognize a surah that's revealed in Medina, Ya Ayyuhal Ladina Amin. Ya Ayyuhal Ladina Amin. Ya Ayyuhan Nas is Mecca, O humanity, because it's a call. It's not a call to believers, it's a call to humanity to come into faith. So Ya Ayyuhan Nas generally reflects the revelation that comes to Mecca. But here you have an exception. Surah An-Nisa is one of two exceptions to that rule. Everywhere in the Quran where you see Ya Ayyuhan Nas, realize that that's a Surah Makkiyah. That's a Makki surah. Except for here. And one other place in Surah Al-Baqarah. There's a verse in Surah Al-Baqarah which is in Ya Ayyuhan Nas. So the question comes, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begin a surah that's revealed in Medina with an instruction that's usually only used for Mecca? Ya Ayyuhan Nas. Generally, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the believers in Medina, He says, Ya Ayyuhal Ladina Aman, O believers. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes that. Starts by Ya Ayyuhan Nas. Perhaps, Wallahu A'lam, perhaps the reason for that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling people. Surah An-Nisa is about dealing with people. It's about dealing with women. It's about dealing with orphans. It's about dealing with the weak, the oppressed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, on the basis that you're a human being, on the basis that you're a human being, maintain the ties and relationship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets within the surah. So instead of just saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina instead, when speaking about how to deal with women and the rights of women and the right of orphan, the right of all of those who are going to be spoken about in the surah, instead of saying you're a believer, it says you're a human being. It says you're a human being on the basis of insaniyah, on the basis of the fact that you're human. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells you, I deal with people in this manner. Ittaqu rabbakum. And then the first verse begins by saying, Ittaqu rabbakum. And it ends by saying, Wattaqullah. Twice in the surah. Ittaqu rabbakum. Wattaqullah. There's a reminder. As you're dealing with people, always be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Taraweeh yesterday, we read the second juz of Surah Al-Baqarah. And one thing you know when you read Surah Al-Baqarah, particularly the second juz, repeating, Wattaqullah, Wattaqullah, Wattaqullah. When does Wattaqullah, when is it repeated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When He's telling you certain ahkam. When He tells you rules. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you about rules, He says, Wattaqullah. So for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah that we read yesterday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala read, there was ayat, ahkam al-talaq, rules about divorce. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about rules of divorce, He always ends it, Wattaqullah, Wattaqullah, Wattaqullah. Surah Al-Talaq, the same. You read Surah Al-Talaq, the first page of Surah Al-Talaq, every ayah ends, Wattaqullah, Wattaqullah, Wattaqullah. There's always a call to taqwallahi ta'ala. When you have surahs that deal with ahkam, you have a constant theme, a constant message that's drilled home, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't just tell you set of rules. He tells you, always remember that there's somebody watches over you. You can, and that's important because when you study a legal system, when you study ahkam, any legal system, there's always ways around it. Any legal system, you can always play the law. Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, Wattaqullah. You can get away with rules in this world, and any faqih can justify anything. You can always find your way around. Well, he begins, Ittaqu rabbakum. Have taqwa of your Lord. Wattaqullah alladhi tasa'aluna bihi wal arham. And how does he end the verse? Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. He's watching over you. He's raqib, he's muraqib alaykum. He's watching over you. So it's worth noting how this surah starts. You're going to have all of these rules that are going to be laid out within the surah. But reflect over the beginning of the surah. At first He calls upon the human being to fulfill these rules. And then He says to you twice, Taqu rabbakum. This is your Lord who created you from a single male. Adam alayhi salam, who created you from a single female, say the Hawa. All of you go back. So all of the ties that you're maintaining, family ties, husband and wife, orphans, the poor and the oppressed, He created you from one man and from one woman. And all of your relationships go back to that time. That's the original bond that there is between human beings. Wattaqullah, alladhi tasa'aluna bihi wal arham. And then He reminds you again, be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who you swear oaths by, and also the one who created you in families, al-arham. You have families, ties that you have. Maintain those ties. Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. So be conscious as we study the ayat and the verses that come through and the hadith that come through. Be conscious that Allah describes Himself as the beginning of the surah as Ar-Raqib subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of His names, Ar-Raqib. Ar-Raqib, the one who watches over you in everything. Ar-Raqib is the name that ties into the description that the Prophet or that Jibreel gave us about Al-Ihsan and ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tara. Worship Allah as though you see Him. If you cannot see Him, then He sees you. That's Ar-Raqib subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who watches over your heart. But here, it's not just about the heart. This is about the one who watches how you are in your relationships with others. Ar-Raqib subhanahu wa ta'ala. He begins the surah by reminding you, He watches you in how you deal with others. Now, looking at the ahadith in Sahih Al-Bukhari, we'll begin at the beginning of this chapter. One thing, is there more copies? Or is that it? Okay. One thing, or just an introductory point for those who are not aware, Sahih Al-Bukhari is considered pretty much ijma' Ahl Sunnah, pretty much in agreement with the Orthodox Muslims, as the most authentic, the soundest collection of narrations, or the soundest collection of anything after the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only compilation that has no error within it, because that's divine. After the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every work has potential error within it, because that's the nature of human beings. And so does the works of Imam Al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim and so on. So we say, Asah al-Kutub ba'da kitabillah. It's the soundest books after the Book of God. Not to say it's infallible. Infallibility is only with the Quran. It's only with the Messenger. That's where no error can creep into. The works of human beings can have errors within it. But this is the soundest compilation that's preserved and transmitted to us, the words of the Prophet ﷺ and those around the Prophet ﷺ. When we look here, again we mentioned this yesterday, Imam Al-Bukhari is not going through ayah after ayah. He's taking, it's almost sporadic, that he'll take parts or verses and any traditions that are related to that, he will give us that. However, what he does first, and he does this repeatedly, he will bring words from the Quran that are quite rarefied, high words in the Quran, and he'll bring explanations from certain Sahaba, primarily Ibn Abbas, Hibr al-Ummah, to give us an understanding of certain words that are quite rare within the Quran. Rare in the sense of the level of language that even in that generation it was considered to be such a high level. Like for Arabs of this generation, the Arabic of the Quran is a foreign language. They're two different languages. But even in that generation, there are words that were considered of the highest degree. So even in that generation, they had to explain words that came in the Quran. So at the beginning here, Imam Al-Bukhari here brings us, four phrases that are used in Surah An-Nisa, and he brings us an explanation of them. So he begins by saying, قال ابن عباس يستنكف يستكبر. Ibn Abbas said, يستنكف is يستكبر. It means to be arrogant. So just to tie it into the verse, this is a reference. Imam Al-Bukhari brings a word that comes at the end of Surah Al-Baqarah. So those who have a mushaf in front of them or translation, if you refer to verse 172. 172 in Surah An-Nisa, and that's why we say he's moving around. He's not necessarily sticking to a clear order within it. Verse 172, at the end of Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the perversion and the errors that crept in to the belief of Christians. وَلَا تَقُولُوا ثَلَاثًا. Don't say thalatha, don't say don't claim a trinity. That comes in verse 171 or 170. لَا تَغْلُوا فِي دِينِكُمْ. Don't go to extremes in your religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with Jews and Christianity, the errors that crept into their belief. And then speaking to the Christians, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to them, لَنْ يَسْتَنْكِفَ الْمَسِيحُ أَنْ يَكُونَ عَبْدًا لِلَّهِ وَلَا الْمَلَائِكَةُ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ. The Messiah would never disdain, yastankif, the word yastankif, would never disdain to be a servant of God, nor would the angels brought nigh. وَمَنْ يَسْتَنْكِفْ عَنْ عِبَادَتِهِ وَيَسْتَكْبِرْ فَسَيَحْشُرُهُمْ إِلَيْهِ جَمِيعًا. And whoever disdains his worship and is arrogant, he'll gather them unto himself altogether. So here Ibn Abbas explains, yastankif means the same as yastakbir. It means to be arrogant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse, when he calls the Christians, believe in the one God. Don't say three. Don't say that God Almighty is three. That came in the verse before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is saying, Al-Masih, Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus the son of Mary, he never refused to worship God. He was not arrogant. He never refused to worship God. In Surah Al-Ma'idah that you'll study with Shaykh Ibrahim, at the end again, and here you see a symmetry in Surah. Surah An-Nisa ends with a conversation with Christians. Same in Surah Al-Ma'idah, and ends with a conversation with Christianity. So at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about what Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam will say on the Day of Judgment in front of him. Isa alayhi salam, he said, مَا أَمَرْتُمْ إِلَّا أو مَا قُلْتُ لَهُمْ. I never said to them, to the Christians, I never said to them to worship me as God be said. I only said to them, أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبَّكُمْ. Worship Allah who's my Lord and your Lord. So Al-Masih alayhi salam, he never refused. He never refused to bow down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He never felt it beneath himself to be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out the people of Christianity. Be the same as Christ. Be the same as the Messiah. He humbled himself in front of his Lord. He bowed down in front of his Lord. So Yastankif, Ibn Abbas, he says Yastankif means is arrogant. Just a point, Ibn Abbas is going to come repeatedly. And when you study Quran, Ibn Abbas is the companion who's central to understanding the Quran. Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, is the companion who is central to understanding the Quran. He's known as Tarjuman al-Quran. He's known as the translator of the Quran. He's considered to be Habrul Ummah. He's the ocean of this nation in the Quran. He did one act when he was a nephew. He was the nephew of the wife of the Prophet, Sayyidah Maymuna, and he spent a night in the room of Sayyidah Maymuna. And that night, as the Prophet was getting up to pray his night prayer, he came from behind with a container of water and placed it next to the Prophet in order for him to do wudu. But he did it in a way that he didn't want the Prophet seeing him doing it. So he just came behind and just put it there. But the Prophet realized what he did. And at that moment he made a dua that changes eternity. It changed his decree. The Prophet made a dua for one act of khidmah for the Prophet. One act of service for the Prophet, just a container of water. He said, Allahumma faqihhu fi d-din wa allimhu ta'wil. One dua of the Prophet changed everything for Ibn Abbas. Allahumma faqihhu fi d-din. Allah give him understanding of religion and teach him interpretation. Allimhu ta'wil. And because of that dua, everything that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhum he speaks about the Quran is through the blessings of the words of the Prophet وَعَلِّمْهُ التَّأْوِيلِ. Teach him. It's the answer of the dua of the Prophet وَعَلِّمْهُ التَّأْوِيلِ. Teach him interpretation of the Quran. We find that within that blessed generation, the greats of that generation was Khuddam al-Nabi. They were those who served the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Abbas served him. He became the ocean of the Quran. The other great man of the Quran, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, great man of the Quran, one of the greats of the Quran. The Prophet said about Ibn Mas'ud, when he recites it, it's as though Jibreel just revealed it. That's the closest you will get to the reading of the Prophet, the qira'ah of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. And what was he? Sahib al-Na'alayn. He was Sahib al-Na'alayn. He was the one who carried the Na'alayn of the Prophet. He was the one who would walk ahead of the Prophet, making to lead him into his house. He was always in a state of service of the Prophet. So the greats amongst them served him, and they became greats. They became greats because they served the Prophet. So Ibn Abbas said, Yastankif means yastakbir, is arrogant. The second word that he explains, qiwama. Qiwama. And here, or first just to tie it into the verse, it's in verse 5. ولا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم قياما وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا. The verse says, and give not the feeble-minded your property. And we'll look at what that means. Essentially, Wallahu alam, do not give the feeble-minded your property. I don't give orphans who are still young, who don't know how to deal with money. Don't give them wealth so that they will misuse that wealth, which God has placed in your hands to manage. But provide for them and clothe them from it and speak unto them in an honourable manner. Here Imam Al-Bukhari brings an explanation of the word to manage. جعل الله لكم فيه أو جعل الله لكم قيام. The word qiyam here. The word qiyam. However, and this is a potential point of confusion, in the Musahif, in the Quran that's mahfuz and mastur, that's memorized and that's transmitted, it doesn't have qiwam, it has qiyam. It doesn't have qiwam, it doesn't have qiwam, it has qiyam. And all of the qira'at mutawatira, they either say qiyama or qiyama. There is no qiwama in the reading of the Quran that's transmitted. There is no qiwama. جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ qiwama doesn't exist. So the question comes, why is Ibn Abbas explaining this word? Just to add a point, the Quran was revealed in sab'ata ahruf, 7 different variants, and it was transmitted 10 qira'at. We have 10 different ways of reading the Quran, all of them revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of them revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whether it's qira'ah of Hafs and Asim that we read, or it's the qira'ah of Warsh and Nafi, or any of the other qira'at, all of them were revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran was revealed in different ways for the Prophet ﷺ to read. But here you have a word that's not what we read, and it's not in any of the transmissions that we have. In the commentaries they mention the word qiwama, although it means the same thing. It means the same thing. Qiyama and qiwama in this context mean the same thing, which means to take care and manage the wealth of the orphans. But here to understand, why is that word there when it doesn't come in the Quran that we read? Why is it there when it doesn't come in the Quran that we read? Because this is the qira'ah of Abdullah ibn Umar. Abban who read, جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ قِوَامًا. It's in none of the qira'at mutawatira, none of the transmission of the Quran that we have, it has the word qiwama, but it's the reading of Abdullah ibn Umar. What we find, the Sahaba, as they teaching Quran, they would explain words in the Quran. They would explain words in the Quran. And their students sometimes would assume that to be their reading of the Quran. Whereas in reality, that's what they term in the books of Quran, qira'ah tafsiriyya. Qira'ah tafsiriyya. It was not read by the Sahaba, which are not part of the Quran, but in reality it's an explanation of that Sahabi of a word that exists within the Quran. As an example, that's mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf. وَأَمَّا السَّفِينَةُ فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر كان يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيب وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. Ibn Abbas read this, يأخذ كل سفينة صالحة غصبا. The word صالحة is not part of the Quran. It's not part of the Quran. Tafsir from Ibn Abbas. It was an explanation of what was meant by the Safina itself, Safinat and Salihah. So the same here, you will have words explained by Sahaba which are said to be qira'ah, but they're not qira'ah. They're not Quran. That was revealed to the Prophet. It's an explanation that came from that Sahabi. So qiwama is your management of your livelihood. The third word that's explained there, the third word that Imam Al-Bukhari brings, lahunna sabila. Lahunna sabila is a reference to verse 15 in Surah An-Nisa. So again, we're just moving around here before we start looking at the verses. Verse 15, after speaking about certain, or begins an introduction into ahkam al-nikah, rules to do with marriage. And the first verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in Surah An-Nisa is hukm al-zina. Hukm al-zina, the rule of adultery, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks by saying, وَاللَّاتِي يَأْتِينَ الْفَاحِشَةَ مِن نِسَائِكُمْ فَاسْتَشْهِدُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةً مِنْكُمْ فإن شهدوا فأمسكوهن في البيوت حتى يتوفاهن الموت أو يجعل الله لهن سبيلا. As for those of your women who commit an indecency, commit adultery, call 4 witnesses amongst you to bear witness against them. And that's the hukm sharia, 4 shuhud, 4 rijal, 4 male witnesses. And if they bear witness, then confine them to their houses until death takes them or until God appoints for them another way. That was the original punishment for zina. The original punishment for zina was not a rajm or jald. It was not stoning to death of the adulterer or lashing of the unmarried person. That was not the original punishment. The original punishment comes here in ayah 15 Surah An-Nisa. أَمْسِكُوهُنَّ فِي الْبُيُوتِ. They are to be detained within their homes. They are not allowed to leave their homes. Indefinite restriction of movement from their homes. That was the punishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed for the zani. in Surah An-Nisa. أَوْ يَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُنَّ سَبِيلًا. Or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finds for them another way. What's the other way? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, خُذُوا عَنِّي, take from me. خُذُوا عَنِّي قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُنَّ سَبِيلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for them another way. البكر بالبكر جلد مئة وتغريب عام والثيب بالثيب جلد مئة والرجم. The Prophet ﷺ himself explained the meaning of جعل الله لهن سبيلا, providing for them another way. The Prophet ﷺ said, take it from me, خذوا عني, take it from me. The unmarried person who commits a fornication is to be lashed 100 times and to be banished for 1 year. And the married person is to be lashed 100 times and to be stoned to death. And that's the punishment, although there's some tafsir, there's some detail on that within Sharia, but that's the general punishment that's mentioned. But here, stoning for the adulterer and lashes for the unmarried is the explanation that the Prophet ﷺ himself gave for the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَوْ يَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُنَّ سَبِيلًا. And for those who study tafsir, this is a prime example of tafsir al-Quran with sunnah. A prime example of the sunnah explained in the Quran. Here the Prophet ﷺ gave us the rule that came to him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fourth word that's been explained, others have said, and this is not from Ibn Abbas, مثنى وثلاث ورباع. مثنى وثلاث ورباع. The ayah is ayah number 4 in Surah An-Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. If you fear that you will not deal fairly with the orphans, then marry such women as seem good to you, 2, 3, or 4. This ayah, which is one of the 2 ayahs in Surah An-Nisa, you have 2 ayahs in Surah An-Nisa, which speaks about ta'addud al-zawjat, which speaks about the issue about marrying more than one. And the first hadith, which we'll look at next week, deals with that issue. The background, sabab al-nuzul, the background to the revelation of this verse. Here Imam Al-Bukhari is just giving you an explanation of mathna wa thulatha wa ruba'. Mathna wa thulatha wa ruba'. Because again, these words are not common. These words are not common within Arabic. So he says mathna wa thulatha wa ruba' means 2, 3, and 4. And the Arabs do not go beyond 4. I do not say khumas, or sudas, or suba' or thuman. They don't use that same pattern. They restrict it. Mathna, thulath, ruba'. You don't go beyond that. It's not found fi kalam al-Arab that they go beyond that in those sects. So Imam Al-Bukhari here, he gives the explanation that mathna means 2 wives. Thulath means 3 wives, or ruba' means 4 wives. We look at this again tomorrow, but here there's an ishkal. Here there's a point that's raised against Imam Bukhari, that in Arabic it doesn't mean that. Mathna doesn't mean 2. Mathna does not mean ithnain. Thulath does not mean thalatha. Mathna means ithnain. Thulath means thalatha. Ruba' means arba'. It means sets of 2, sets of 3, sets of 4. Like, for example, the hadith that speaks about Salat al-Layl of the Prophet ﷺ. Salat al-Layl, the night prayer of the Prophet ﷺ, kind of mathna. It was in sets of 2s. So here there's an ishkal. Here there's an issue that's raised against the explanation that Imam Al-Bukhari brings, that the 2s, 3s, or 4s doesn't mean 2, 3, and 4. It means sets of 2, sets of 3s, and sets of 4s. But we'll look at that, bi'iznillahi ta'ala, tomorrow, when we look at the first of the hadith that Imam Al-Bukhari speaks about. So chapter 1, verse number 4 in Surah An-Nisa. If you feel that you will not deal fairly with the orphans. That very same verse. إن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع. Before looking at this ayah, because this is the ayah about polygamy. But as we mentioned previously, ayat of the Quran have to be looked in context. When you look at these ayats at the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, it's speaking about orphans, it's speaking about al-aytam, it's speaking about orphans. It's speaking in the context of orphans. And the 2 narrations that are being brought by Imam Al-Bukhari, they speak in the context of orphans. The ayat about polygamy were revealed in the context of orphans. So when you look at the verse before this, verse 3, which will come back to, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about those who are responsible for orphans to ensure that they do not usurp the wealth of orphans, that they do not misuse the wealth of orphans. The orphan is somebody who has a father, or somebody who doesn't have a father to take care of him when he's young. So somebody who's prey, somebody who's open and prey to the worst of people. And that was common amongst the Arabs in Jahiliyyah. In Jahiliyyah, the weak and the oppressed, primarily the orphans, they could be used and abused any way that they want. So the wealth of the orphan that was inherited by the orphan, the wali of the orphan could use it any way that he wanted. Young female girls were orphaned. They would marry them as they saw fit. They would treat them and abuse them as they saw fit. So the first verses in Surah An-Nisa come to deal with the rights of orphans. And in the midst of that, you have the verse of polygamy. So we'll look at that tomorrow, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Are there any questions before we finish? Any questions? Okay, let me ask some questions of you. See who stayed awake. No questions, Shakil? No questions? You okay with that? No, تفضلي. She saved everybody a question there. Yeah.
At what point does someone stop being an orphan? So, like, for a boy and for a girl?
For both of them. See, there's a difference here. There's a difference in terms of lugha and in terms of sharia. In terms of lugha, even in lugha, the norm, urf al-nas, the normal way that people use it, the term yatim is usually somebody who's not baligh, ghayr baligh, somebody who's not reached puberty, a child. Often usually refers to a child. But within Sirah, we read that the Quraysh often will refer to the Prophet as yatim Quraysh, or yatim Bani Hashim, or yatim Abi Talib. Even though he's an adult or grown man, they will refer to him as yatim. So they said in terms of language, it's not restricted to age. But in terms of Sharia, it's yatim. In terms of Sharia, in terms of ahkam that are set by Allah specifically about a minor. Somebody who's not reached bulugh, somebody who's not reached puberty. Then after that, because the concern in the verses that deal with ahkam al-aytam, al-yatim, the rules about the yatim, are about protecting because he doesn't have a protector. He doesn't, particularly the father, is not there to protect. But once you reach an adult, then that person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need somebody to take care of that person because he's able to take care of himself at that point. Wallahu a'lam. Any other question? Or that was my question. Okay, the question, to see those who are awake. What was the verse, what was the only verse in the Quran that was revealed inside of the Kaaba? Go on, open your phone, one check. It's the only verse in the Quran that was revealed inside the Kaaba. Yeah? Hold on, you're asking another question. Which verse in Khiftum? It's number 2.
Yeah. Verse 3.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, no, that should be 3. Yeah, that should be 3. That's an error. Yeah, that should be 3. Okay, so answer the question. That's it. That was diversion. That was. Go on. Now you check. Verse?
58.
Okay, verse 58 in Surah An-Nisa. The only verse in the Quran that was revealed inside the Kaaba. Wallahu a'lam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم وإلى حضرة النبي الفاتحة